August 31st at COS. And Tony, if you would, do you mind opening us in prayer?
Sure. Father, we come to you today. We ask that you continue to bless this great county. We ask you to be with our students, our teachers, our support personnel. We just thank you for the great start. We thank you for the normalcy that we've had somewhat. We ask that this coronavirus, Lord, will be taken care of. We just ask that that your blessings will be on each of us. Lord, forgive us where we fail you. We just pray that everything we do and say will bring praise to your kingdom. In Christ's name we ask it. Amen.
Amen. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you all. Okay, Mr. Tyler, amendments to the agenda? No amendment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, no amendments. And to the action items.
Yes, ma'am. Agenda item 1, county sales and use tax collection agreement. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the county sales and use tax collection agreement and resolution as specified in the attached agreement for the period beginning October 1, 2020 and ending September 30, 2023 as stipulated in the agenda exhibit.
Motion by Ms. Lynch.
Second.
Second by Ms. Colley. Any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Agenda item 2, membership renewal, Alabama Association of School Boards, AASB 2020-2021. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve to pay the cost of membership in the Alabama Association of School Boards, AASB, for the 2021 fiscal year as stipulated in the agenda exhibit.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Colley, second from Mr. Christenberry. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Agenda item 3, Alabama Trust Boards of Education General Liability Errors and Omissions Liability Fund Participation Renewal 2020-2021. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the renewal of the ATBC General Liabilities Errors and Omissions Liability Fund Participation for 2020-2021 as stipulated in the agenda exhibit.
So moved.
Motion by Ms. Colley. Second by Mr. Johnson. Any questions or discussions? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries.
Agenda item 4, leaves of absence of personnel. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the leave of absence of personnel as provided to board members under separate cover.
So moved.
Motion from Mr. Christenberry. Second from Ms. Lindsay. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Agenda item 5, retirement and resignations of personnel. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the retirement and resignation of personnel as provided to board members under separate cover.
So moved.
Motion for Mr. Myrick. Second from Mr. Johnson. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Agenda item 6, transfer, intent to transfer of personnel. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the transfer, intent to transfer of personnel as provided to board members under separate cover.
Motion from Ms. Lynch. Second from Ms. Lindsay. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Agenda item 7, Employment of personnel. The superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the employment of personnel as provided to board members under separate cover.
Motion for Mr. Myrick. Second for Mr. Christenberry. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Agenda item 8, extra work for extended periods. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the extra work of personnel as provided to board members under separate cover.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Colley, second from Ms. Lindsay. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? And the motion carries.
Agenda item 9, administrative appointment. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the administrative appointment as provided to board members under separate cover.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Colley, second from Mr. Christenberry. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Agenda item 10, 2020-2021 revised extra work wages. Superintendent recommends adoption of a motion to approve the revised 2020-2021 extra work wages as stipulated in the agenda exhibit.
So moved.
Motion from Ms. Colley, second from Ms. Lynch. Any questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
That's all, Ms. Dawson. I do want to say congratulations to Tony Pollard. He's here, our new transportation coordinator for Baldwin County Public Schools. So that is all I have.
All right, that is the end of the agenda. At this point, I will close the meeting. We're going to take just a few minutes to move to those tables, and the senior staff is going to move back. John wants us to be able to look straight on to the screen. So, and they're going to move our microphones as well, so we can ask all the questions we need to.
No questions. The meeting will last longer, no questions.
Test.
All right, we ready to roll?
You ready, John? Okay.
We're ready to rock and roll.
We won't be able to get that 5 minutes back, will we?
Sure won't. All right. Welcome to the FY21 budget hearing. I'm John Wilson. I'm the CSFO, and today is August 31st, 2020. So before I get started, like I always want to do, I want to give a shout out to the two ladies who work so hard every year to get this budget done, especially this year. This was a very kind of unique year in that, a lot of us were pulled in a lot of different directions preparing for school to start with the coronavirus situation, the federal grants, allocations came in late, abbreviated work hours, all of these things all played a part in putting together this budget for this year. And so my two supervisors, if y'all want to stand up, Lisa Riles and Patsy Chastain are the rock stars that help me every year. So I couldn't do it without them, so I can't thank them enough for all their hard work this year. All righty. After saying that, you guys ready to roll? I know, it was an action movie based on an accountant, that's my jam right there.
That's a good movie. That's a good movie. That is a good movie.
All right, so I always put this slide first, and it's just to accomplish really two things. And that, number one, it's just to show what a large organization we are, and number two, it's also to show how limited controls we have over the funds. And so everyone got their budget book. This is a summary. Every year I always kind of do a PDF of what the budget would look like if you went line by line. And it's over 1,100 pages long for this fiscal year, which if printed out, it would be 5 inches tall, it would weigh over 12 pounds, and it would kill a lot of trees. For this year, we have 76 different sources of state, federal, and local funds. We actually have some different funds from federal. We also have the different 3 mil funds that are included in this year's budget. 65 out of the 76, 86% of the fund sources are earmarked funds that are restricted to be used for designated purposes. So that's always a point I like to point out. A lot of people don't realize just how many of these funds are restricted and earmarked. So this is the budget summary. And what this is kind of the overview system-wide. As everybody knows, we operate using 5 main governmental funds. You have your general fund, your special revenue fund, your debt service fund, capital projects fund, and your fiduciary expendable trust fund. And so just as a review, just kind of going over the classifications that are in each fund. General fund, this fund accounts for all financial resources of the school system except those required to be accounted in another fund. The primary operations of the school system are performed in the general fund. The general fund is what I present to the board every single month. It is the main operational account for the school system. Special revenue, this fund accounts for the proceeds of specific revenue sources that are legally restricted to expenditures for specific purposes other than state funds. And so basically all of our state funds are restricted, but that's the only restricted one that's in the general fund, if that makes sense. Debt service, this accounts for the repayment of long-term debt, both in principal and interest, capital projects. Pretty self-explanatory. The financial resources used to acquire, construct major capital facilities, other than those that are proprietary or in the trust fund. And the fiduciary expendable trust fund is a long name, and that is the non-public accounts that are at the local school level. So you can see how all the funds lay out here. In the budget book here, you can see this same format, and you can see it broken down for every single school in Baldwin County. You can also see the central office and the different departments breakdown, all within this book. This book's online as well. And then in the very back of the book, you can see the staffing allocations for every single school as well. All right, so let's jump right into it. So if we look at our budgeted revenue for FY21, we have three main sources. You have your state revenue, you have your federal revenue, local revenue, and then other revenue. And I'm going to drill down to each of these categories. You can see we're budgeting for a $5.1 million increase in our state revenue. That's about a 3% increase. We saw a decline in federal revenue of $1.7 million. That's about a 7% decline. I'm going to walk into what makes up that decline. And I'm also budgeting a $5 million increase in our local revenue, roughly a 3% increase there. Local revenue, when you pull all the different funds together, not only includes our local tax revenue, but it includes food service income and local school revenue as well. Other revenue on the bottom there, that's really the rebate revenues. And so the big part of that is our P-card rebate is included in that. Over $500,000 is what we're anticipating to receive in FY21. We also get E-rate rebates and C&P rebates. So that's what falls in the other revenue category there. So a total of $8.9 million increase in revenue, representing about a 3% increase year over year. You can see how that's broken out almost evenly, with 46.9% local, 46.3% state, federal is 6.4%, and others about 0.5%. All right, so you can see the breakdown. If we drill down into state revenue further, a majority of the increase has come from the foundation program. And you can see that was a net $4.3 million increase in the state foundation program allocation. So let's walk through that. So for anyone who may not be aware of the foundation program, the baseline for the funding is your ADM, and that's your average daily membership. The average daily membership represents the total average enrollment during the first 20 days after Labor Day of the previous school year. So the 30,041 students was the average from Labor Day till about the first week of October during the fall of 2019. That's calculated, and that is used for the next fiscal year's funding purpose. It does not include pre-K either, and Baldwin County is one of the largest pre-K school districts in the state, with over 800 pre-K students as well. So you can see, looking at our ADM, we had an increase of 395 students from FY20 funding purposes. That results in 25 additional earned teacher units. We had 2 additional principal units. Before I get into that, that's about a 2% increase in ADM. That's about what we're used to seeing, 2 to 3% growth in student enrollment every year. And so that's, even after the Gulf Shore split, we're continuing to see growth at the same rate that we've seen for a number of years now. The 2 additional principal units in the ADM report, Alberta Middle and Orange Beach were included, so we were able to earn 2 additional principal units there. Assistant principal earned another half, counselor earned 1.5, librarian earned an additional unit, for a total of about 30 additional certified positions for this fiscal year. So if we take our 30 positions and we map it on the state salary matrix, the total amount, well, if we take our 30 positions, adding up to our 1,924 positions, with state funding purposes, we can see that the salary based on the state salary matrix is $102 million. Because of the extra 30 positions, we saw a almost $3.7 million increase. We see an increase in the fringe benefits amounts due to the extra earned units. And then we saw a nice increase in OCE, other current expenses, and I'll talk about this for a minute. And we saw that from $19,000 per unit to $808 per unit, and so we saw about an $800 per unit increase. Other current expense is the only avenue of state funding where we have the discretion on how to spend those funds. Everything else is earmarked. Currently, we are using other current expense for two main purposes. We're using it to fund 496 classified positions, and I'll talk about that in a slide further down the presentation. And we're also using it to fund the difference between the Baldwin County salary schedule and the state minimum salary schedule. And so the difference there, we use other current expense, and then I try to plug as many classified school-based employees as possible. Really, that covers all of the $38 million in other current expense. If we look at the classroom instructional support, if you look at CIS, it stayed the same. Every teacher in Baldwin County, whether they're local, federal, or foundation, gets $600 per year to use for instructional material in the classroom. We currently use the Class Wallet program, and so that allows them to go on Amazon or I think about 40 other vendors and order to their school. They don't have to worry about a PO. They don't have to worry about all these other administrative things that were just a hassle before. And so that's really been a positive program. Technology, $350 per teacher unit, library enhancement, professional development. Those three items, based on the number of earned units at that school develops a kind of a budget committee. And so the teachers vote on who's going to serve on that committee. That committee puts forth a budget within the guidelines of how these funds can be spent. And then the rest of the not student body, but the teacher body will vote on that budget, and that's what they'll use for the remainder of the year. Textbooks, we saw that $75 per ADM. So we saw $30,000 in textbook funding. So if I was to look at the foundation program before the 10 mil match provision, it's $184.8 million, representing a $6.8 million increase year over year. Now, if we combine the slides, the two slides we just went over and kind of show the whole picture, you can see that unfortunately our 10 mil match went up. Went from 37.4 to 39.9, which was an increase of $2.4 million. And so our net foundation funding from the state is $144.9 million, and that's your 184 minus your 39.9. So net increase is $4.3 million in foundation funding. All right, so that's the big one, but I do want to talk about the other areas of state funding before we move into federal. Transportation, we saw about a $100,000 drop in our transportation funding, going from about $12.4 million to about $12.3. We're still spending about $1.7 locally to cover our full operational cost. Majority of that is related to the 67 bus drivers that we have to fund locally, and we also will cover some additional fuel cost. I think there was a decrease statewide that kind of trickled down to us. A lot of these will follow on the route reporting standpoint, and there may be a few of that still trickling down from the Gulf Shore split, but I think majority was just a decline statewide. Capital outlay, those are the state funds that we use for a lot of our repairs throughout the county. We saw an increase there of $291,000, $2.1 million of that allocation is used to pay state bond payments. And some of these state bond payments have been on the books for 15, 20 years. We're slowly approaching the end of some of these bonds, but we have to still continue to hold on to these state bonds. OSR, Office of School Ready, the pre-kindergarten program. This is a grant-based program that funds our pre-K program throughout the district. We saw a $334,000 decline this year versus last year. And let's talk about that for a minute. So the reason behind that is, number one, we're allowed to carry over some of our funds. And number two, when you first are awarded a pre-K grant, they give you startup money. They give you money for the supplies in your classroom, and in some situations, they give you money to do a pre-K playground at your school. All of our grants are established now. And so a lot of the startup money that we've maybe received with some of the new schools coming on board, wasn't the case this year. And so it is a decline, but it's not really a decline like it appears on paper there. One thing that I like to point out, and this is something that nobody talks about. It is a great pre-K program, and Alabama has a very high ranking on it, but Alabama doesn't fully fund it. And that's what they never, ever talk about. And they increase the funding statewide every single year, which is good. But at some point, it'd be nice if they fully funded this program. And so we're having to supplement $1.9 million of Title I funding in order to fully fund the pre-K program. And that's why you see it on our Title I schools. Talking about fleet renewal, we saw a nice yes, ma'am. $1.9 million of our Title I funding. It's almost 30% of our Title I funds go to the pre-K program in Baldwin County. Looking at the fleet renewal, so a nice increase. And this is the first time in probably the 10 years that I've been in my role where I haven't had to significantly supplement the fleet renewal. Now, for those who may not be familiar, fleet renewal is based on the number of buses in your fleet that are 10 years and under. It has been a process to try to get fleet renewal back in a manageable type situation. Gene McCutcheon took out a loan in 2007 with a super high interest rate to buy 90 buses. And so when I came in on 2012, I knew that 2017, we were going to have 90 buses roll out of our fleet renewal. And so every year we tried to buy about 25 to 30 every year so we could get into a situation to where instead of taking out a loan or long-term debt or supplementing these things, we can fully use our allocation to buy the amount of buses, which usually works out to anywhere from 25 to 30 buses per year using state funding. And so here we are. I think the plan is to, that we're looking at purchasing 23 regular buses and replacing 5 special need buses this year. So Glenn and Tony and the guys in transportation do an awesome job pulling that together every year. So, I know that everybody's excited. We're finally kind of squared up on the fleet renewal side, and we can kind of keep our buses and our fleet in a really young, good position. So we have less breakdowns and less issues to worry about and more buses under warranty, which is always a good thing. All right, going from there, looking at the Alabama Reading Initiative. So we saw a $158,000 increase in ARI funds, going to about $1.3 million. We have about 32 ARI reading coaches throughout the district. We're able to fund about 18 with the ARI state funding source. The rest we cover locally. I'm sure a few board members remember when they made a drastic cut to the ARI reading program, and we decided to make sure that we continue to support this program locally. And then they come and they do the 3rd grade reading initiative after cutting the ARI program. So, it's about what you expect. The school nurse program, I know we've talked about this, especially in light of the COVID-19 situation and just how critical school nurses are in every single one of our schools throughout the county. We saw a modest $60,000 increase. So yay, go Alabama legislators. They had to get out of Montgomery as fast as possible and can't do a special session because it's too dangerous, but they don't want to, provide funding for nurses for our schools. So of the school nurse program, it's a little over $1 million. We're able to fund 14 out of our 59 RN positions. We also have 18 LPN positions funded locally. So we have 77 health-specific employees in Baldwin County, and we have to cover 45 of the RNs locally and all 18 of the LPNs locally. And we're fortunate in Baldwin County that we have the financial resources to do that, because a lot of places in the state do not, and they're really facing a challenging situation in the COVID-19 circumstances that we're in. Looking at risk, we saw a $52,000 increase. It funds about 6 out of our 12 social workers throughout the county. Career Tech O&M, operations and maintenance funds, that was about flat. It's small, but it's helpful. One thing that I do have to give credit for in this session is that we saw a nice increase in state ESL. We saw that almost double on the state level, and they also tweaked the formula a little bit to where if you have a certain school in your district that has over a certain percent of ESL students, then funding increased. And so we were able to see a $351,000 increase in state ESL. So that's a very, very good step in the right direction, bringing us from $282,000 in 2020 to $633,000, allowing us to fund about 9 out of our 29 ESL teachers throughout the county. The state also provides a little bit of additional preschool funding. We use that funding for about 2 teachers and 3 aides for our 800 plus preschool students. Gifted education, this is, you can give me all my soapbox here, but this is one of these weird funds that I don't really understand because it's in the ETF budget, okay, that the legislative body passed in May, but the State Department doesn't make the allocations available to individual school districts until into the fiscal year. So here we are, tomorrow, September, and they haven't given us any allocations yet. And so I can go to the bill and I can look and see what the total statewide allocation, and you can see what your statewide population, but that's too hard for people in Montgomery to do that in a timely manner. And so I just kept that flat. And so we'll have to amend that because some reason whoever's in charge of that department struggles with it every single year, and it's kind of perplexing to me. The tech coordinator would... Tech coordinator, they dropped it by $432, Homer, I'm sorry. In light of distant learning, we're going to cut your salary, sir. And last year, we had a one-time anti-bullying state grant of $40,000. That was just one time. So that makes up our $172.6 million that we have in state revenue for FY21. Compared to the 167 that we had last year for the $5.1 million increase there. So I update this slide every year. And so if you look at it on a dollar by dollar basis, you can look at the blue, it's just dollar by dollar state revenue per student. And then, so you can see that we have surpassed the 2008 high water mark, which is very good, and we're trending in the right direction. But I also think it's important to note that we've had 20% cumulative rate of inflation since 2008. And so if you really want to look at it on an apples to apple basis, we should be close to 6,700 if you wanted to factor in the inflation rate since that period of time. And that's all based on the consumer price index, and I ran that August 12th of 2020. But trending in the right direction. All right, jumping into federal revenue. Individuals with a Disabilities Act, that's IDA Part B, and that's where we get our special ed funding. Very nice, almost $400,000 increase in IDA. That's about 6%. It's very much needed because you may remember we had an over $800,000 cut in our federal IDA funding last year. And so this gets about half of that back, but we're still behind where we were in previous years. The Perkins Vocational Education Federal Grant, that was about flat, going from 341 to 349K, about a 7,000 increase there. Title I, now I kind of struggle with Title I. We went from 6.3 million to 6.1 million. And unfortunately, the state is just not very transparent on the calculation of this allocation. And so it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly what is the cause of this drop, other than you have more schools, you have charter schools, you have more districts eating the same pie, so to speak. I know that's part of it, and I'm going to talk about our free and reduced numbers in just a few slides. and we'll look at that. Title NND, we saw that increase by 23,000, that's a nice jump from a percentage basis. Title II, we saw a $15,000 increase in our Title II, going from 920,000 to 935,000. Title II we're estimating hopefully to use about 10 class size reduction units from Title II, and then a lot of our professional development district-wide will come from this funding source. Title III, ELL, we saw a $52,000 increase. Sorry. Title IV, Part A, we saw a $14,000 decline, going from $490K to $475K. 21st century. Now, we've had a lot of detailed discussions here. Ms. Penn is here, and so we're out of the 21st century grant business. We applied, they rejected us, even though we had schools with 90% free and reduced. Didn't apply, and so I think that this particular funding source has kind of gotten political, and non-public education entities now have the ability to apply for these grants, and it's just gone, and it's just more is going outside the public education arena than inside the public education arena. And so we are completely self-sufficient in Baldwin County. We are a Baldwin County locally funded after-school program. So, I think in the long run, that's going to be a good thing. The paperwork and the red tape and all of these aspects really are challenging on top of just running the after-school program. And so there will be challenges in becoming completely self-sufficient, but I think we're in a good position to meet those challenges and continue to grow the after-school program. I put USDA, the CNP, because it is federal funding. We tried to be as conservative as possible and base the number of reimbursable lunches and try to factor in that we just have we have fewer kids. We have 7,000 kids that are currently enrolled in the virtual school program, so that's going to result in less paid and less reimbursed lunches district-wide. I do know that some of these kids will come back to their school, but for a conservative basis, we just wanted to go ahead and plan like they were going to stay in the virtual school and not participate in the lunch program, resulting in a drop in the reimbursable federal USDA revenue line item. No change in Department of Defense funding. That goes towards our ROTC teachers throughout the county. And we saw a modest increase in other federal revenue. And what that is that we have two grants. We have a SPED grant that funds 2 transition coaches that work within the county that help our special education students move from a student into into the real world, whether that be a job or just transitioning into I'm trying to think what I'm trying to say here. Other programs, workforce area. And then we have a career tech education grant that's from SWAFTI, the Southwest Alabama Partnership for Training and Employment, that has gone to Baldwin County High School and Foley High School. And that makes up the $276K of other federal revenue. And so you can see that the main areas where we dropped from 25.8 to 24 would be conservatively budgeting the USDA numbers, having almost $1 million of federal 21st century grants rolling off, and then the drop in Title I funding. Now, what's not included in this breakdown, but will be included in the amendment, would be any carryover CARES Act funds. We're going to spend, a lot of the funds we've already spent this summer preparing for this school year, and there's a reimbursement request process, but we still have funds that are going to carry over. And so any carryover funds, whether it be CARES Act or it be any of these items, will be included in the January amendment. But for apple-to-apple comparison, I didn't include carryover funds. All right, looking into special education costs. And so our budgeted expenditures for special education for this year is right under $40 million. It's broken out in 23.3, directly coming from our foundation earned units. Federal funding is $6.6 million, and local funds is $9.8 million. So you can see here that roughly 60% of our special education cost is funded through the foundation program, using that funding source for resource teachers and those SPED positions throughout the county. About 25% is covered locally, and only 17% is covered federally. And I think that's really a data point that a lot of people don't understand. I think if you were to ask them who funds special education in the schools, they would say it's funded federally. That couldn't be further from the truth. And it is frustrating because if you read the IDA law, it states that 40% of the SPED cost is to be covered federally through this funding source. Unfortunately, Washington is exempt from following their own laws because they refuse to allocate the appropriate amount year after year that would correctly fund this program for Baldwin County and really all school districts throughout the nation. Yep, I got it in the next slide. Shows the difference between the two. So this funds 658 employees, covering. Now this is the student count for last school year. We don't have this finalized yet, but it was 4,670 special ed students ages 3 to 21 throughout the district. So you can kind of see how does this compare to last year, Shannon, just directly answering your question, that we did see a federal funding increase of 6%, but if we take our total spending of state, local, and federal, we saw an increase of 8%. And we even had our student count drop from the Gulf Shore split. So we're still seeing an increase year over year in our special education expenditures. Specifically, a little over $3 million year over year. So I've shown this every year. And again, these are the 2019, 2020 student numbers. And we did see the impact from the Gulf Shore split, how our numbers went from over 4,800 to just a little over 4,600, but still a very scary trend.
Does this correlate with the state?
No, this is just Baldwin County. Unfortunately, nobody is to this level of growth. Now, you will normally you see fluctuations, but you don't really see straight up. Yeah, so fewer students, but we're spending more. Just to summarize those couple slides. Going back to what I said before, just the myth that our special education students are funded federally, I think this chart kind of shows it. Since 2014, we've seen a 17% increase in our student count, and we've seen almost a 30% decline in our federal SPED funding. In fact, our student count is not even factored into the allocation. Majority of the breakdown is generated from Title I percentage and census data. They actually don't take your child count into consideration, which is just absolutely crazy and absurd. And I wish I could explain the rationale behind that, but. We did. It was about a year ago, or yeah, and we've ramped up our training. We tried to address this. We still have more work to do, obviously. Yeah.
We were working heavily on that before COVID.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a very good point. And it was a big focus. And then COVID kind of just put everything aside as we started the school year. But once we hopefully get back to some sense of normalcy, that'll be something that we continue to provide training for, we continue to watch, and we continue to try to get a better handle on.
Has data been kept from at least the time that the training started until we had to quit for whatever, COVID or whatever, and what the impact of that training was on identification or?
I think the data we're going to get, if we start testing this year, when we start looking for referrals this year, will be more accurate what we're looking at, because what we would have looked at would have been spring. And that's when we went out. That's typically from third grade. You start testing their referrals coming in the spring. So those are put on hold. So I think what we would start getting now will be a better reflection that we will report back on that.
Well, Sarah mentioned also that we did, I think we kept you all apprised of about a year ago where we all came together as a staff and all the collective bodies around special services, and we met for a while and kind of tried to identify some areas of concern that maybe had not been properly managed over the years through really no one's fault, but it just wasn't something that seemed to resonate. So I know Renee has put something out to our schools, it was last spring, to hold our schools more accountable. There was, Renee, I forgot what you had called that you put out, as far as everybody was supposed to watch something and then respond. Is that correct?
Correct. We had professional development video on the processes of the entire process, and they were showing those at the schools, and the principals had to report back on a Google Doc when every teacher completed the trainings, which we would also be going in for some small group training if we saw the data trends that Ms. Jim Dawson was talking about. But of course, like we said, in the middle of all that, COVID hit, so it was kind of put on the back burner with the data because we were not in school to collect that.
I think everyone is on notice in our schools that we've got to somehow get a handle on the special education, either referral process or increases that are happening, and so hopefully we can see some results of that coming up maybe in the next year.
Well, it will get to a point where, when you're talking about maintenance of effort, well, we're going to get to a point where we're putting so much money in there we can't do anything else. And I don't need for the conversation to go to the budget over students, but there has to be something where we're identifying students or helping students as opposed to, I don't know, throwing money at a problem.
Well, and I think we need to be providing services for students who truly need it. I think the question then comes is why year after year are we seeing such an increase? Is it that we have that many students that need these services, or is it that somewhere along the way there's been misdiagnosis?
I know we have had the conversation before with Renee and Hope and probably Joyce before she left as well about the fact that truth of the matter is Baldwin County does such a great job in addressing the needs of special education students, that parents who hear that, who are amenable to moving for the sake of the child, pick up and move to Baldwin County for what we are.
That's what
Well,
I was going to say.
I understand that, but we still have to pay for it.
We got numbers at one time about how many of our incoming students are already paying with IT identification, and then you don't have a choice.
I think it also takes a while to switch some of the mindset that, for a long time was don't give a child a 504 plan.
No.
Maybe look at an IEP because there's federal funding involved. And, it's taking, we are changing the message. Patrice is doing a good job of changing the message, but it just takes time for that to trickle and see that.
Right.
Yeah, I do think it's a combination.
Yeah, I don't know that we have the data yet to see that that's
We do
been.
not, but we will as we progress this year. We will be definitely in the next month or so putting our energy back where it needs to be for this entire process. And like she said, it's definitely a change of mindset. And everybody thinks special ed, but it's a change for general ed teachers. And that's where we're working. We're working inside those general education classrooms to help build that mindset of change of, because they're struggling doesn't necessarily mean they're special education. Yeah.
And I know this is something that it seems like we talk about every year in our budget hearing because the numbers are kind of shocking. I hate to speak for everyone else, but this is something that I'd kind of like to revisit more than just once a year, just so we're aware of how things are going.
How clearly, and I'll stop asking questions because I know this takes forever, but how clearly do you really feel that the, probably, maybe not the principals, but at least the teachers, the general ed teachers and special ed teachers as well, how clearly do they grasp what maintenance of effort really means in a budget?
They don't understand that at all.
They need to.
Right.
They need to. They need instruction on, when the budget says maintenance of effort, what does that mean? They need to understand that. Because their decisions, that they're making locally are the decisions that directly impact maintenance of effort. And once we start paying them, we never have a chance, right, John?
That's
we can't
right.
ever stop.
So that's the challenging part about SPED too, is that
Right.
there's the federal maintenance of effort provisions, basically stating that once you spend state or local funds to supplement SPED, you can never cut it. And so it sets the baseline of what you always have to spend the next year. It's one of those situations that if you don't manage and you don't provide the appropriate oversight, can get you in serious trouble if you do have a financial, decline, whether that be in your federal funds or whether that be an economic downturn, because you can't cut that funding. So you have to cut from everywhere else. And so it's when times are good and the sales tax is rolling in, it's still not the time to just throw money at these issues because you can never cut it. And that's just a very frustrating provision of the law that I think was intended to be in there for them funding 40%. But I wish there was a provision that says you don't fund what you said you were going to fund, so don't hold us to these same stipulations. But of course, that's not the case. And I do think a lot of teachers truly think that if I referral this student to special education, they're going to be in the student count and we're going to get federal funding. And so that's why I wanted to have this chart here, just to say that's a myth and that the student count is not even used to calculate your federal funding.
I really think there should be a professional development.
Yeah, I know.
And I know the need to move on, but I do want to make one point about that. We have to be so careful for a good balance of looking for what the student needs.
Yeah.
And just because the parent says, my child needs this, does not mean that we can't say no if we have the proper data. But at the same time, we don't want to say no if the child needs it. So our training is based on what children need, and we're really training teachers because sometimes they're scared to make decisions and say no when it's special ed because they do not want to do process. So that's where we're concentrating our training. It is okay to say no if you have the right data in front of you. And so that's really where our concentration will be the next year or two.
But I attended the training last fall, and everybody did an excellent job. In fact, I learned a lot of things. And so if that can just trickle down at the local school level, I do think we'll see improvements. Okay, moving over to our Title I numbers. So you can see this is the chart of our free and reduced percentages going back to 07. We saw a 6.7% increase in our free and reduced. numbers, which brings us back to over 47%, which is a more accurate representation of the county. The 41 that was done in FY19, you guys probably remember last year we were talking about that, and that it was really a technical timing issue around the ADM report, which is 20 days after Labor Day, and then there's a 30-day free and reduced kind of waiver time period. And so based on the start of school, and so the 30 days from the start of school lined up exactly with the 20 days after Labor Day. And so we had a lot of parents that didn't fill out their free and reduced lunch applications at the same time. We had to report it to the state and kind of created an artificial drop in our numbers. And so we really pressed hard last fall. We called parents. People even showed up to their house, and we were able to truly get the get the free and reduced lunch applications for the students that really needed it. I think that when I'm standing here next year, that we're going to see a drop in these numbers. Not because we're seeing an influx of wealth. It's because it's going to be very hard to get the virtual school students to sign the free and reduced lunch paperwork. I think we just have to come to the realization that it is what it is. What the impact of that will be, I guess that'll be determined, but if our numbers go down, it will impact the allocations to our Title I schools. Now, the good news in that is that Governor Ivey has appropriated $100 million through ADECA to do internet vouchers, and if you do qualify for free and reduced lunch, then you automatically get a voucher. So there will be parents that will take advantage of that. There will be parents that probably don't even know that's out there and that it exists. Yeah. Yep, and yep, and just if you couldn't hear Hope, we have sent that to every single virtual school parent. Here's free and reduced lunch forms. Here's the application through ADECA to get an internet voucher for your house. So we'll kind of see, and then we'll also do a push on our existing schools to make sure they get notice out to the parents that may be on that 30-day waiver time frame. So as we get, really we'll kind of have a indication of how these numbers look when we're into October and we're calculating the ADM report. So the 47.7% of our student population, again, this is based on last year's numbers, was a little over 14,000 students that fell within the federal poverty limitations to qualify for free and reduced lunch. It's 19 elementary schools, starting with Pine Grove at 85.8%. Going all the way to J. Larry Newton at 43.3%. And as you look at this list, you can see the areas. It's the Foley High School feeder pattern, it's the Robertsdale High School feeder pattern, it's the Baldwin County High School feeder pattern that have majority of our Title I schools. Newton and Daphne Elementary School kind of are the only schools in the Eastern Shore area, and they're at the kind of the bottom of the bunch there. We have typically we usually have 4 middle schools that also qualify for Title I funding, highest being Foley Middle, then Bay Minette, Central Baldwin, Alberta. Daphne Middle School, if you fall within 35 to 40%, you qualify for targeted assistance, and that makes you eligible for Title I funding, and it's your option as a principal if you'd like to receive that or not. They determined they would like to receive target assistance funding, and so it was provided this year. So they're one of our new Title I schools. All right, moving over to the C&P summary. One of the interesting things for me is just looking at the meals equivalent per month. If you look at the breakfast, if you look at the lunch, if you look at the snacks, you see that we serve over 400,000 meals equivalent per month throughout Baldwin County, which is just a massive, massive number. We have 255 C&P employees countywide. We have 4 main revenue sources. We have the USDA, and I've talked about that one, of the $8.5 million in reimbursements based on free and reduced lunch applications. We have estimated sales, and these are the non-free and reduced students who buy their lunch. We're estimating that about $4.8 million. We transferred from the general fund $4.9 million. And what this covers is that we can use federal funding to cover the salary of the 255 CMP employees, but we must cover locally the benefit cost. And so that's a little under $5 million. And then, as I mentioned in a previous slide, right under $800,000 in state CMP rebates, bringing our total revenue to a little over $19 million budgeted for FY21. All right, moving to local revenue now. Really to start this off is to figure out what is our pro rata percentage estimate in local revenue that we'll have to share with Gulf Shores. And so you can see when the ADM report done in October of 2019, Baldwin County had 30,041 students in the ADM count. Gulf Shores had 2,157 students. Works out to about 93.3% of the students in Baldwin County go to Baldwin County school system, and 6.7% are currently attending the Gulf Shores city school system. So then we prorate that out to our local revenue. And you can see our non-mills countywide is where we would see the pro rata amount applied, estimating about $47.6 million countywide. 93.3 for the non-mills is $44.4 million for Baldwin County, and the 6.7 is roughly $3.1 million for Gulf Shores. The district, the 3 mill District 2 tax is not done on a pro rata basis. It's based on the geographical limits. And so the District 2 tax for Gulf Shores is based on the tax collected within the city limits of Gulf Shores. And District 2 for Baldwin County is everywhere else in the county. That works out to about $12.6 million in Baldwin County and about $2.3 in Gulf Shores. So we're estimating $57.1 million in ad valorem revenue in Baldwin County, and Gulf Shores has about 5.5. The same thing would apply to our 2% sales tax that we share with Gulf Shores. Estimating countywide for the 1% to bring in about $42.6 million. We're estimating our 93.3% share of that will be just under $40 million, and Gulf Shores will have around 2.8, or combined the 2%, it puts us right under $80 million in Baldwin County and puts Gulf Shores right under $6 million. So if you look at the general fund, yes, ma'am. Yep. Yep. So that's a very good question. So Ms. Colley's question was that, there's been a run from Gulf Shores trying to take, some additional sales tax dollars. And so outside of the general fund, in the special revenue fund, because it's earmarked, is the half-cent sales tax, and we get 0.4%. That is a local legislation that directly goes to Baldwin County and is directly earmarked, and it directly goes to the county commission, and then part of it directly goes to Coastal Community College. We fully negotiated in the Gulf Shore separation split that because of that, and they asked for it multiple times during the split, is that we did appropriations in other areas, such as we continued to cover their debt costs for a 5-year period as a way to resolve that issue. But it is frustrating because that was included in the split separation negotiations, because that was a concern of theirs, and we did address it. And then they've had about a dozen meetings with legislative officials, county commissioners, anybody they can talk to, except for us, to try to make a run at that amount as well. So, and I know this is being recorded, but I mean that's the truth. So they're still. I mean that's still an ongoing issue, but it would have to take a legislative change in the existing bill for that to change the appropriations. And maybe when the 5-year period is over and we're not assuming their debt obligations anymore, we can all go back to the table and we can work out a solution for the long term. But I don't think it's appropriate at this time, in my personal opinion. Yep, good question. All All right, looking at the local revenue, and again, this is general fund only, so it doesn't have that 0.4%. And for everyone, that 0.4% is earmarked for basically school maintenance, repairs. We actually pay all of our utility bills through that half cent, which is about $9 million a year. And so that's a huge chunk of it goes to paying the light bills and the insurance, and it falls under the purview of what's allowable. So like I mentioned, that the ad valorem, after we share the pro rata amount with Gulf Shores, was a $2.8 million increase there. Business privilege tax really stays pretty flat within that range every year. I am budgeting around a 3% increase in sales tax revenue. Sales tax projections in this environment are, to be honest with you, extremely difficult. It's hard to know what's going to happen from today to a month from now to 6 months from now. But because of our ability to bounce back like we did from the COVID-19 shutdown, I feel pretty good about including a 3% increase in sales tax revenue, kind of monitoring of where we may be close to the end of the fiscal year. But I will be watching that, and we can always amend later and you guys will see it monthly as I do the monthly updates. If we're looking like the 3% may have been too aggressive, then I'll temper that down in an amendment. Other county revenue, majority of that is alcohol tax. That makes up about $250,000. We also see some miscellaneous items come through this, such as manufactured home, helping school tags, offshore gas, oil and gas revenue is included in that as well. The next one, bank interest revenue. So in 2020, when we started the fiscal year, we were getting a very good interest rate on our deposits. We also had some of our reserve balance in an additional account making even higher interest rates, to where we were projecting over $2 million in interest using our existing accounts, and we were able to negotiate a really good rate. Unfortunately, coronavirus happened, and the Federal Reserve dropped interest rates almost close to zero, and we're just getting a few basis points now. And it's really, I can't hold the bank accountable for that because it's everybody in the nation. I mean, when the Feds dropped rates as aggressively as they did, whether it be the school board or whether it be in your personal account, you just can't get interest on anything in a safe investment type environment. I do think we'll still get $500,000 of interest revenue, just based on our fund balance and what we're looking at. Other revenue, what this is this would be the after-school program. We have about $800K budgeted there, and then I'm estimating about $1.2 million in Medicare reimbursement. The $600,000 decline between the two is really because we've seen a drop in our Medicaid reimbursements for whatever reason going through this fiscal year, and so I dropped it back down. So you can see our total local revenue in the general fund, $40.7 million, about a $3 million increase. Now, y'all don't forget that 10 mils of our ad valorem is earmarked where we can't spend it because it has to be used to cover the equity funding provision for the foundation program, bringing us to pretty flat where we were last year. You can see the breakdown here of the $57.1 million. You can see it between property tax, and you can see it between probate taxes. All right, halfway done, guys. Frank, you doing okay? All right, so that was revenue. So let's dive into our expenses. Unless anybody needs a break. Everybody good? Yeah. All right. So this is the same B1A summary of the budget. We're going to talk about the expenditures now. And so the expenditures are broken down into 8 main functions, and I'll go over all 8 in detail. We're currently budgeting approximately $450 million for FY21. Our total expenditures, when you compare that to FY20, they've dropped, and mainly because we had a lot of capital projects that finished up this fiscal year. We also have some federal funding carryover amounts that I mentioned from the CARES Act and some of the other things that will be included in the January amendment. So if I take our total budget, this is all funds and all expenditures, you can kind of see the breakdown there. And so, 67% of salaries and benefits. So you can see with our pay-as-you-go program and our debt, almost 24% of all of our expenditures are tied into those two pieces of the pie. So if I take that out, if I take debt service, if I take capital projects out of the budget, you can kind of see what's left. And you see that 88% of all of our expenditures are directly tied into the salary and benefits in Baldwin County. 2.4 in purchase services. I'm going to walk through purchase services, and 9.4% of materials and supplies. But since we're almost 90% take out capital and debt, personnel, let's walk through personnel. So for FY21, this is personnel by funding source, and let's looking at your state, let's looking at your federal, and let's looking at your local. So I mentioned that we earned 1,937 teachers, certified units through the foundation program. We have our 14 nurses there. We have 316 bus drivers and other transportation employees covered under state transportation funding. We have our 18 ARI coaches under state funding. I mentioned that the state OCE, the other current expenses, and that was the only really state budgeting item that we have discretion, that we have almost 500 classified employees coded there. And then we have some other programs such as at-risk, state pre-K, OSR, that, and also, I think that covers most of it between OSR and pre-K and at-risk. That covers the rest. So 2,816 total employees funded through state funding. With federal funding, we have 118 funded through IDA Part B. We have 70 funded through the title programs, and that's Title I, that's Title II, and Title III majority. We have 255 funded through the federal programs. Now, again, that just funds their salary. We have to locally cover their benefits. And then the Fed others are the 6 ROTC instructors that are funded. And just to clarify that funds half their salary, and then Baldwin County funds the other half. If we look at our local programs, we look at where we would say our sales tax funded positions is 847 employees, and the other 18 other locally funded, that is related to 18 positions that were approved within the Fairhope feeder pattern using the 3-mil tax district funds. And as a board, you guys saw the detail of that, I think, in the June board meeting. So Fairhope tax district is only is for 30 years. And so because of the duration of the tax, they're allowed to actually hire employees under the assumption that they're aware that the salaries and benefits for as long as that person is employed in Baldwin County will have to come out of that source of funds. Spanish for it is only a 10-year. And so we're not allowing them to actually hire employees. They just do part-time contracts. To last year? That's a good question. So if you were to pull our FY20 budget presentation and you look at the bottom line number, it was 3,713 in FY20. And if you look at FY21, it's 4,129 employees. And there are also some employees that are being hired that are not included in this total. The virtual school hiring, to say it lightly, has been fast and furious, and we still have some advertisements that are still rolling out today. And at some point in time, I just had to set a stopping point, or I would never be able to finish this. And so we actually have more than that, but I tried to grab as many as I could. 70 unfilled, okay. And I'm gonna talk about the virtual school. And so that's total employees, Mr. Johnson. If you want to look at what's driving it, it's that 847 under the sales tax funded local. And so if you looked at last year, our locally funded employees, that total was 709, and this year is 847. So let's drill down into the 847. If you look at the 847, you can see a big jump in teachers. You have about 137 teacher increase from last year, and that's really due to two main factors. Number one, we rezoned 7 schools throughout the county at the same time, and so there were some personnel positions that we had to just pick up locally. They will be included in the ADM report for October, and hopefully we will be able to bring those numbers down. And the second one, like you all know, is the 7,000 students that enrolled in the virtual program this summer. Really, the other amounts you can see locally funded. We have 20 counselors, we have 4 principals, and these are some of the reconfigured principals. Plus we have 2 principals at Orange Beach, but they only earn 1. 24 assistant principals over and above the foundation funding, and we have about 26 other certified employees. And that's really, a lot of the employees that work here at the Loxley office. You can see for support personnel, I have it broken down into some broad categories. We have the aides, special ed, and instructional. We have 86 locally funded positions there. For clerical, I included bookkeepers, registrars, secretaries, the ladies in my office that do accounts payable and some of the payroll stuff, and anybody that would fall under the clerical nature. We have about 77 locally funded positions there. Technical, in the technical category, if IT technicians, nurses, LPNs, social workers, positions that really have a technical kind of focus to it, we have 80 locally funded. I've mentioned about the 45 of those are directly nurses, and I try to put some of these positions in OCE, whether it be a technician or social worker or some nurses, and try to fill that up every year as well. Maintenance, looking at our custodians at the school level, and also looking at from a district-wide, if we have to locally fund some mechanics or HVAC repair, electricians, painters. We have all those positions too. We have 121. Majority is custodians at the local school level. 67 bus drivers and 13 other administrative positions. And what that would be like my position. That would be like, because this is classified, so it's not certified. So it'd be like mine, Mr. Kaufman, Chastity, some of my supervisors, Mr. Kaufman supervisors that aren't certified. So it's just kind of that miscellaneous bunch. So that's 847. And so when you add the salaries and benefits, that's $55.8 million that we have this year. What the cost was, it was around $48 million. So, we're seeing a $12 million jump in cost, and I'm going to go into that in this next slide as well. And also, just for everybody's benefit, that the extracurricular and athletic supplements we provide district-wide to all the coaches is just a little under $1.8 million. So let's talk about the virtual school cost. And because, like I said, this was coming so fast and furious, I kind of took the numbers based on what I know that I have approved for advertisement purposes. And especially when I talk about the high school, a lot of those positions have not been filled, and I still have some more reconciliations that I need to do regarding this. But and Hope can clarify if this is not correct. But what I currently have in the budget for the elementary virtual school, we got 1 principal, we got 1 lead teacher, we got about 69 regular elementary school teachers, 2 intervention teachers, 8 special education teachers, 2 gifted teachers, 2 ELL teachers, 1 speech path, 2 counselors, 1 registrar, 1 bookkeeper, 1 computer tech, and 2 RNs. Does that sound pretty close? Okay. Yeah, so that's about 93 employees. So that's I don't think any of us have ever seen the level of hiring that we've had to do in such a short period of time, really just like a month or less than a month than we had to do for specifically the elementary virtual school. Salaries and benefits, that's $8.8 million. Okay. All right. So I think the intent was that it's not two in one site, but it's maybe one in the north, one in the south.
When you think about it, when they start tutoring, if you medically fragile child, which is the majority of our special ed kids, we're paying out for virtual or MFA. And if an emergency were to happen, we just wanted to be able to have. And you have, once you have all those kids that are medically fragile, they all have healthcare plans. So they're all at their base school, and so that was gonna be one nurse with elementary and secondary, all the drafting of those healthcare plans. Well, I think secondary has their own.
Secondary has one as well.
So one of the things that also happened with the nurses is that, so when you look at the enrollment of students within the virtual program that left brick and mortar, that have healthcare plans, that are medically fragile, and there's a high acuity level of the type of intervention that they need, that was part of the strategy and plan so that those students don't go with needle support system, and then go to the virtual system and have seizure disorders, need feeding assistance, so forth and so on, and there's no medical provision of medical care for them in that particular location. And two was one of those reasonable numbers that we came up with to be able to accommodate and make sure we provide medical assistance
It
for those
did,
students.
and the kids leaving to go virtual did open up the ability to shift some of the nurses on the campuses that only have one. So they reassigned some of those teachers or nurses to campuses. So there are very few now.
Yeah.
And all those teachers were not brand new hires, they were always reassigned, so
Right.
we would have lost so many students to the virtual.
And I think the RNs were hired as itinerant, and so if there's not specific tutoring going around, then they can be kind of reassigned to a school kind of in that feeder pattern or area to help out as necessary. So you can see the $8.8 million there. The materials and supplies, it's about 1.1 to get the modulars set up, and then the elementary portion of the lease of the old CenturyLink building in Foley was about $50,000. So now the main reason why I can look at this slide calmly is it's really because of the State Department granting us emergency cost center approval. I mean, I can't express how huge that is. And what that means is that this the elementary virtual school will be included, and all the students enrolled in it will be included as a separate school in our October report that we send to the state, making the funding available in FY22. Your next question is, will that impact our other schools? And the question is, yes. I mean, it definitely will. The good news is that we do have flexibility with virtual school units. In that with a virtual school unit, once you've met the needs of the virtual school, you're allowed to flex it wherever you need in the county. And, just as an example, and I know the divisors are much higher than this, but, let's say we continue to have, 30 students per teacher at the virtual school, elementary virtual school, which I think on a virtual level, you can handle a higher level of students. Now that we've classified that as a cost center, we'll get funding for what those students earned. And for K through 3, for every 15 students, you earn a teacher. And so you can kind of see this is how we kind of get some of our locally funded units taken care of to where all these students will be counted in the virtual school. We'll be able to monitor internally if these students are moving back to their brick and mortar school. And even if we still have a large number next year, we really will only need about half of the units being earned, allowing us to continue to use those units throughout the county to reduce class sizes and in other areas. And so it's very exciting to me that we're doing in this manner. We're the only school district in the state of Alabama that runs a virtual school in-house. Everybody else contracts that out with a third party. And the third party gets all the funding. I mean, so there's no benefit to the school. And we have about 3 or 4 school districts that are being investigated federally for the third party virtual charter school that they contracted out with. A lot of them were misrepresenting the student count. And they were including students that may have been in jail and other purposes, which alerted the feds to go in and look at it, which alerted to a lot of other issues. And you had the feds storm a superintendent's house in North Alabama because of that. And so I think we should be proud because we're the only system in Alabama that's actually doing this right. So, yay for us. And I've been screaming about that forever because it was kind of the wild, wild west out there. And, you know, we're only using Baldwin County kids and we're doing it with Baldwin County teachers. Everybody else is opening it throughout the state. And it's just no way to count and manage that. And it's just created fraudulent type situations which are getting these systems in trouble today. All right, I'll get off my soapbox there. Going into high school, and again, these are the positions that we've advertised. And so when I was putting together the budget, I took what we advertised and I put it into the budget. Now, a lot of these teacher positions at the high school we haven't filled. And I also want to say that, you know, we earn about 15 state-earned positions, and this is not state-earned. So this is just local cost over and above state funding of what we advertised. 35 teachers, 1 intervention, 2 sped, 2 counselors, 1 RN, computer tech, clerk, and registrar, additional registrar. And this is all in addition to the employees that were there in previous years. Now, because we're not going to fill all these 35 units, and me and Tiffany we have a lot of reconciliation to go to see which ones she can't fill, which ones she can. That's why we kind of utilize the supplement for existing teachers that can help after school hours. So it's hard to find math and it's hard to find science teachers. And when we need those at the virtual school, especially at this time of the year, they're just not out there. And so our solution to that was give a $7,000 a year stipend so we can grab a science teacher, grab a math teacher in one of our existing schools that can help grading after hours, can also record lessons and those type things. And basically, because typically at the high school level, we would use the state access program. And the state access program is ran through Troy University where those teachers teach. And really our teachers could be kind of facilitators. Yes, thank you. Now, what's so funny about, well, I guess it's not funny, it's kind of sad that the state ran out of money in the access program. Okay, so they didn't appropriate any money into the access program, immediately ran out because of course demand was high because a lot of systems are going distance learning. And so they came out and said, you're capped. You're capped at, I think, 5% of what you used last year. And so that really put us even further into a pickle. And it's just, I mean, it's funny because we used $14 million of CARES Act money to do a virtual school vendor that's not accredited. At the same time, we let the access program lapse with not enough funding. No, the state did, yes. We, as the state of Alabama, yes, Alabama did, which we all have come to expect these things, so let's be honest. And so what we're doing our own access program. We have a lot of teachers in Baldwin County that participate in that program. Let's skip the middleman and just do it ourselves. And I think this is going to be a good program that we'll be able to replicate for years to come, even when we get through the COVID situation. So to summarize that, you can see about $13.3 million. So that was a big chunk to bite off in July. But it also points out and demonstrates the massive amount of resources that we poured into the virtual school since July to really ensure this program is a success. I mean, to be honest with you, we're having to scrape the bottom of the barrel to pull this out this year. I mean, that's what we're having to do. You know, we are in a good financial position to be able to absorb an expense of this magnitude as quickly as we did. So, just to kind of put things in perspective, and so in this shows salary and the benefits. So the blue is the salary and the orange is the benefits, and it just kind of shows a historical perspective of where we've been. And so we're at $55.8 million. And so we've exceeded our 2009 limit when we were at about $54.6 million. And what happened in 2009, thank God I wasn't there. I know Miss Dawson lived it and probably still has nightmares about it, but you know, we got hit with proration. And when you get hit with proration, you can do one of two things. You can either cut those positions or you move it locally. And so the intent was to move it locally to see if we can weather this storm. And then the BP oil spill happened, and the recession got worse, and it was just the combination of a lot of negative things happened at once. And it went from 54.6 to 29 million in 2010 with a massive, painful RIF. Now, we're in a different position now. I mean, we've got additional funding. We have additional 1% sales tax. We have additional stability compared to 2009. But I mean, I think it's always important that we look at where we've been, so we don't always, you know, so we can ensure that we don't repeat the past. So this is just another chart illustrating the divide between the sales tax revenue and the personnel cost. The blue is the personnel cost. The red is the 1% sales tax revenue. And these are all things that I said because we're going to get additional state funding, because of the 7 reconfigured schools will be considered, we'll be able to narrow this gap substantially. In fact, I know that we will. But I mean, I just, you know, we have to narrow it, and we will.
We'll be able, when you talk about flexing, teachers,
Yeah.
depending on next year, perhaps the year after, virtual school issues, then with attrition, you can move some of these local funds.
Absolutely.
Even if they're into state funded positions and reduce our.
Yes, ma'am. That's the intent, is to try to move as many of the locally funded units into state funding next year when we do have the virtual school included, when we do have the reconfigured schools count included. But just so you know, it's not like we can use that and just hire new ones. Because, you know, again, we've got to narrow this gap, and I'm going to talk about it later, but I mean, we're eating into our fund balance to do this, but that's okay. I mean, this is not a normal situation, and that's why you have a fund balance. But eating into your fund balance should only be for a short-term period.
So when the 2 lines cross, that's where we're making up here.
Yes, sir. That's if you didn't hear Mike, when the 2 lines cross, that's when we start eating into fund balance. And I've got another chart that kind of will hammer this point one more time. But before I do that, just talk about the benefit costs, just for everybody who doesn't know, what that is. And so for PHIP, we pay $800. The board, this is the employer cost for every employee, that the board pays $800 a month for PHIP, which is the health insurance, which is $9,600 per year, and that's for every employee. Whether you're a bus driver or the superintendent, $9,600 per year is what the board provides. Retirement through RSA, there's 2 different tiers. You have Tier 1, and this is what the board pays, and you have Tier 2. Tier 1 is any employee that was employed before January 1st of 2013. Tier 2 is any employee afterwards. Federal, FICA, 6.2, Medicare, unemployment. Total benefit costs in the budget for this fiscal year 2021 is $76.1 million. And just to give you an example, so if we hire a brand new teacher with a master's degree, the starting salary is about $49,106. But the true cost to the board when we hire an employee is that you have almost $19,000 in benefit costs. And so when you hire a brand new teacher out of college with a master's degree, it costs us about $68,000. And that's not including supplies and substitute costs and those type of things. Jumping into debt service, you can see we've refunded almost all of our local bonds that we can. We have the refunding of 12, 15, 17, our pooled state warrants that I mentioned in an earlier slide. You can see the principal and interest payments. The regions 4-year, I know Mr. Tyler talked about this at the ribbon cutting, but this time next year, we're done with phase 3 PAYGO. So all of that will be paid off. We do one $15 million principal payment this year, and that's done. So the projects, Bay Minette Elementary, Orange Beach, Mathis, Bell Forest, those will all be paid off at the end of this fiscal year. It's an incredible task, and it's not one that anybody in the state of Alabama is doing in the same nature that we are. I mean, it's a very, very aggressive repayment schedule, but it's going to save us millions in interest costs over the long run compared to a long-term bond. We did a refund of the 2012 and the 2015 when we did the private placement in July of 2020. It was a partial refunding, and so some of it's still there, some of it's not. I've still got some reconciliation that I need to do at the end of the fiscal year. That's when I book all of our debt. And so I'll be tweaking this a little bit, but the interest saving per year was around $140,000, and so we'll still be over $30 million in principal and interest payments when we factor in the 2021 debt service. Looking at the long-term debt annual payments, you can see that we're about to start the next phase of the PAYGO program, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But that goes till 24. And then 24, depending on what our situation is, we'll roll out another PAYGO, or we'll kind of reevaluate things at that point in time. You can see we still have bonds that are going to be on our books till 2038. And that was not John Wilson. That was, that was the challenging nature that we walked into. That's why we created the PAYGO program, because when I started in this role, we kind of maxed out the credit card, so to speak, from a borrowing standpoint. We didn't have the ability to do that, but we had needs, and we had a substantial amount of needs. And that's why we created this innovative PAYGO program that's allowed us to open 3 new schools this year and a new school in Bay Minette and do these really innovative things that I'm very proud of. One more chart, put this in perspective, hammer this home, and then I'm done with this. But due to equity funding with ad valorem, sales tax are our bread and butter. If I take the 2% collected in the general fund, it equates to $79.9 million. That's with the 3% year-over-year increase that I have budgeted. So if I take all of our personnel and then I add the debt costs on top of that, that's $85 million. That is where we start dipping into our fund balance. But again, like I said, that's okay. We have a healthy fund balance. We built it up. We built it up for emergency situations. But we have to make sure that we don't dip into it for a long period of time, because that's when you get in trouble. We're good now. But again, these are all things that we'll have to make corrections and make adjustments, and we're going to have an influx of additional funding to do that for the next school year. So I'm very confident in our ability to do that. All right. Looking at the expense functions here, and this includes all funds and fund sources. You can see where the majority of our funding increases came from, and that's your instructional services and your instructional support services. You can see that increase just under $15 million compared to last year. You can see that I mentioned that one of the big reasons why our total expenditures are less this year compared to last is because of the PAYGO building programs that are wrapped up or about to be wrapped up in this fiscal year. And you see that with the almost $30 million decline there, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more details as well. But you can kind of see the breakdown. You can see that in the pie chart form with 57.1 instructional support. You still have the 24% there in capital and debt. That's really a huge chunk of our budget when you look at all of our funds and fund sources combined. How do we compare to the state average? This chart compares us to the expenditure functions with state actuals based on the latest information that I had. The problem with this chart is that we're spending so much more than average on capital outlay because we're the largest growing school system in all of Alabama, that it's skewing some of the other percentages. And so I'll walk through these percentages, but in order to clear up the skewing, I've compared these categories by what we spend per student compared to the state average of what they spend per student. And it really gives you a clearer perspective. Because as you can see, the 15% here, is definitely skewing a lot of the other areas. But just so you can look at it from operations and maintenance, we're at 8%, state average was 9%. Auxiliary services, this transportation, this is C&P. We've always ran very efficiently compared to the state average. Debt service, because of the PAYGO program, and there is a higher amount that we have to pay per year. We're at 7% versus 5%. General admin at the state level is 4%. We're at 3%. And then, like I mentioned, capital outlay is 15 and 6. Instructional support, this is where you're kind of seeing a skew in some of the percentages, and that's why I wanted to go into the evaluation of what we spend per student. And so if I look at that, if we compare our budget for FY21 compared to the state average actual per student, you can see that we're about $780 more per student than the state average that we spend for instructional and instructional support services. If you look at capital, you can see we're over $1,300 more per student than we spend in Baldwin County. And that's just trying to keep up with the growth. And then if we look at general admin costs per student, state average is $455 per student. We're about $392, so we're about $62 less per student than the state admin. So I hope these charts kind of illustrate that we're allocating more for instructional, we're allocating more for school buildings, and we're continuing to try to cut and run the admin side of the school business as efficiently as possible. All right, looking at the general fund, looking at the expenditures here, you kind of see the same trend. You see there's about a $13.2 million increase in instructional services and instructional support services, which ties back to the virtual school slides, because we didn't really impact the hiring at the brick and mortar schools. I mean, majority of all the virtual school positions were in addition to what the schools already had staffed there based on their allocations for this year. Look at the breakdown. You can see in the general fund, we're about 82.4% instructional support. And you can see we're 6.7% operations and maintenance. We're transportation about 5.2%, general admin about 4%, and other expenditures after school, pre-K about 1.7%. So looking at the category definitions here, and so I'm going to break down the details of instructional support, and then we're going to break down the different categories here. And just so everybody knows, before we kind of walk into the definitions, the different areas here. And I also want to remind everybody that, we are dictated by the State Department of Education to adhere to their accounting manual. So these descriptions, how we code things, I have no flexibility to customize expense categories or anything to that nature. I've got to use what they give me. And so this is what they give us. Personnel services, like you said, that's salaries and benefits. Purchase services is an interesting one. And if I had the ability to customize it, I would change this because it's too broad in my opinion. This group includes costs for services which by nature can be performed by persons or firms with specialized skills and knowledge, or services performed by persons other than school employees to operate, repair, maintain property owned and used by the school system. There's a variety of different things, from our auditing and legal fees to building repair services to the garbage service to our telephone, internet, postage, utilities, electricity, water, gas, travel expense, training expense, professional development expense, food services. All these would technically fall under purchase services for this purpose. Materials and supplies, this is the group that includes costs for items that are consumed, worn out, and deteriorated through use. This would be, of course, your books, as well as, in some cases, your computers. This would also be custodial and maintenance supplies, vehicle supplies, your fuel, your oil, your tires, food supplies in the cafeteria, office supplies, non-instructional supplies, testing supplies, non-instructional software, and any non-capitalized equipment. Capital outlay, this group includes costs for acquiring fixed assets, land or existing buildings, improving grounds, capitalizing property such as capitalized property such as buses, furniture, server, etc. Majority of that is building. Debt service, principal and interest payments. All right, now if we drill into instructional and instructional support, so the definition for that and what that is that instructional services, and you can see all of these, basically this is the 8 categories of function expenses that you'll see in the budget summary, but instructional services are instructional activities dealing directly with the interaction between teachers and students. And so this is where all of our teachers are coded, which makes sense. Instructional support, these are services or activities providing supervision and or technical logistical support to facilitate and enhance instruction, i.e. these would be your principals, your APs, your counselors, your ARI, reading coaches, your curriculum leaders, anybody that provides that instructional support, but it may not be the direct teacher-student interaction, if that makes sense. And so we see 95% of this budget amount of $227 million is directly personnel expense. We see that that purchase services is about 1%. That's professional development, and materials and supplies is everything from textbooks to computers to instructional software, etc. Operation and maintenance services. So any activity concerned with keeping up the physical plant open, comfortable, and safe for use, and keeping the ground, building, and major equipment in effective working condition and in good state of repair. These include activities of maintaining safety in the buildings, on the grounds, on the vicinity of the schools. Included in this function are security services, janitorial services, utility services, and maintenance services. So this one is the general fund, and it's grabbing the half-cent sales tax and the special revenue account, bringing the budget to $33.2 million. And you can see how that's broken out. 43% of that is directly personnel expenses. You can see maintenance, repair services, about 8%. SRO security costs, about $2 million to the district, is 6% of that budget. 36% is utilities and insurance. Like I said, that's the majority of what we spend our half-cent sales tax on. And then 7% is janitorial and maintenance supplies. Auxiliary services. Auxiliary services is transportation, and it's also C&P, so I'll break these down. So 72% is personnel, 3% is purchase services, 10% is kind of miscellaneous of different things from fuel costs to bus parts to supplies to also some of our fleet vehicles. So included in the budget is the purchase, actually it's the replacement of 3 service trucks, and it's also 3 Ford Focus vehicles. That's really just maintenance and replacing the older service vehicles within our fleet. I have details on that. If anybody would like that, I'd be happy to provide it. And then the yellow is the school bus purchases, like I mentioned earlier. It's the 23 regular buses, and it's the 5 special need buses that we'll look to purchase this fiscal year. Looking at the C&P program expenditures, you can see 47% is personnel, 2% is purchase services, 45% is just the actual cost of the food in the cafeteria, and then materials, supplies in the kitchen equipment is making up about 6% of the C&P budget for this fiscal year. This does include federal funds. Looking at general administrative services, and this one's always been very interesting, but just as a recap, these are activities concerned with establishing and administrating policy for operating the school system, such as the Board of Education Services, Executive Administrative Services, Business Support Services, and System-wide Services. Business and finance, HR, IT services would definitely fall in these categories. 59% is personnel. What I've always thought is interesting is that you can see 10% of our G&A expenses are directly related to the server cost. In my opinion, the server cost is really more of an educational role because we are a one-to-one environment and every student has a computer, as opposed to a general admin expense, because it's a very, big part of the educational environment. Unfortunately, the state's a little bit behind in how they, expect you to classify these expenses, and we have to put them in G&A. Like I said, I have to follow the state accounting manual and where the categories are. But it is interesting. Like I mentioned earlier, we are substantially less than the state average in G&A. Most systems in Alabama are not a one-to-one system. And so if you were to reclassify the $1.2 million of server expenses out of G&A and into a educational category, you would clearly see, really how efficient we are running a lot of our behind-the-scenes administrative functions. Purchase service, those are related to expense regarding the annual audit, the accreditation expenses, a lot of copier leases. We're also about to hopefully wrap up a new HR software system that will hopefully allow us to better integrate with our payroll accounting system there, and that's 7%, and then materials and supplies and these type things are about 10%. So that makes up general and administrative services. Other expenses, red's pre-K. These would be your teacher, your aides, your supplies. That's about 64%. And the blue is your pre-K, and your red is your after-school program, personnel, and SARPC contract. And one of the things that the board approved tonight was that SARPC's having a hard time filling the positions that we need. I know that Ms. Penn has gone to them saying, I need X people. They're a staffing agency. That's their job. We pay them a 28% fee to do that. They're coming back and saying we can't find anybody. And so starting October 1, we're going to just do it internally. It's nothing personal. It's just that, we're paying them a premium and they're not able to provide the services that we need at this time. And so coupling that with our frontline sub finder program, I think we can do a better job recruiting and getting our own people in there and saving money as well. Looking at some of our large maintenance projects, a lot of the things are coming from the state capital allocation. You can see chiller replacements, Daphne High School, W.J. Carroll, cooling tower at Orange Beach Elementary. The board just approved the re-roofing of the cupola at Fairhope High School, chiller replacement at Foley Middle, chiller replacement at Magnolia, Perdido, boiler, and then we kind of have some countywide budget pooled items that go to various schools based on their needs. We're still looking at doing gym bleacher repair when needed. We still like to continue to repay parking lots, based on the ones that need it the most. Same thing with gym floor repair, almost $500,000 for there. Restroom renovations as needed. Intercom systems, floor replacement, $650,000 there. Roof replacements, $115,000 based on the need. I usually put about $500,000 for HVAC emergency funds into the budget because you never know when those will just stop working, but it's something that we have to jump on immediately. And a big initiative that that Mr. Tyler and myself have been pushing for is the upgrade of some of our older playgrounds to meet ADA guidelines. We have about $2.5 million as we continue to address that throughout the county. We did about $2 million last year. And I tell you what, you talk about an exciting principal. You tell them they're getting an upgrade to their to their playground, and they are just so excited. And so it's really been a neat project. It's been great seeing videos of the children playing on those, and especially the special needs children who now have a playground that's adaptable to their needs as well. So it's very neat. And then last on the list is what the board approved at the last board meeting, and that we're going to do some replanting on the 160 acres at Faircloth Field, bringing us to about $6.2 million. All right, pay as you go, phase 4. So the plan here is that I'm going to pull the first $25 million drawdown in October of 2020, and we will start our phase 4 of this program. You probably remember the summary of the schools that that we have, and that's Stonebridge Elementary, and that's the Spanish Well Elementary School expansion, the Newton expansion, and the ninth grade academy. For about $54.5 million. So that is, we're going to pull out and we're going to borrow 2 draws of $25 million for a total of $50 million. And so we will have to grab about $5 million of local funds to complete phase 4. Now, I don't have the entire $54 million of expenses included in FY 21 budget, since these projects will take multiple years, and we're only pulling down $25 million for this year. Plan to pull $25 million the next fiscal year as we wrap these projects. And I didn't want to artificially show a big deficit in the capital projects fund, knowing that these will be a multi-year project. Also, once I have more details about the timing and the exact amount, we will amend the budget to cover the state bond offering. We know that's probably going to be anywhere, I think it's going to be around $33 million comes to Baldwin County. Those details are slowly getting out to us. I still don't know the process. They're just now doing a survey for the timing of it. All of these things will be included in an amendment once I have more information of how this will flow. So right now, this is only covering our local PAYGO projects. But it is possible that we could shift some things around, maybe cover a new school in addition with state bond funds and CTE building with PAYGO. But I'm kind of still working through those decisions. And there'll be, again, more information on the bond and the career tech building kind of as we get into the fall. Cash projects in progress right now. You can see we've started the Fairhope ninth grade academy, and we're over halfway done with the Daphne Middle School. So out of about $11 million of some saved cash projects, we still got about $7.8 million to go for this fiscal year. So looking at the general fund, again, our main operating account, you can kind of see where we are in the budget. And this is kind of the slides that I referred to multiple times in this presentation and really, kind of hammered it. In that, we're looking at $304 million in revenue, looking at $311 million in expenses. That's about a $7.4 million deficit, but that still brings us to a healthy fund balance of $44.6 million. But I fully intend this deficit is only going to occur for a 1-year period. But again, like anything, I need the support of the board to hold us accountable if we do have to make those difficult decisions, which sometimes comes with these type situations. Now, I'm very confident through the use of existing available funds for the next school year that we can get the train back on the track and continue to advance Baldwin County to the next level on all bases of education. But this is the first deficit that I've had in my 9 years as CSFO. But what a crazy time all over the world it is right now, and we still have just right under 2-month balance even after that, which is a testament to everything that we've done over the years. And so we're still in a very good position. So, all right. Only 40 more slides to go. I'm just kidding. So our presentation is over. Frank's happy. I had to get him back. He's been making fun of this forever. I know he looks forward to it every year. So.
I do want to make a comment, John, to all of you, superintendent, your staff, you and your staff, and all of you who work so hard on the radio. Oh, you mean you can't hear me? Are you kidding me? Now, can you hear me? Okay. I did want to say that I wanted to make a comment on, the superintendent and the senior staff and everything that you do in your office as well. The fact that the general admin percentage stays consistently below what other school systems in the state spend at the top level says loudly, if anybody is listening, that in Baldwin County, we have less people at the top doing more. And y'all are to be applauded for that. That's great.
Thank you, Ms. Dawson. Just to wrap up, again, any questions, I have a public input sheet. Also, feel free to email me any written emailed questions, anything covered tonight, please email me, and I will address all of those questions at the second budget hearing on September 15th. This presentation will be available on the website, bcbe.org/accountability, and that's my email address right there. Again, thank you guys.
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Ms. Dawson, that's all we have. I didn't know if you were going to talk to the board about your District 1 meeting or...
Well, I'll just remind everybody, or perhaps Cecil, you missed it. We talked briefly about the District 1 meeting that's being held September 10th for our school board. We will collectively meet here at the COS, and Louise is helping to currently try to work with Olive Garden, Ivy's from Robertsdale, and wherever else she might have to go to work out the meal that we will have that will be served. So just want to remind everybody of that. Put that on your calendar so you can be here for that. Shannon will be making the presentation this year, and it's on cyberbullying and cyber, tech and stuff, and it'll be very interesting. So if you have any questions, let me know. If you want real answers, talk to Louise.
Looks like she's had to practice with it.
Louise. Anyone else have any other questions or any comments or any concerns or anything they'd like to express to John, to the superintendent, or anyone else relative to the budget or anything else? If not, we all thank you very much for being here, and that's the end of the budget hearing, and thank you, everyone.